Brilliant. Okay, I'm on the air live with Aircraft Sparky for a excellent, hopefully, debate or discussion of sorts on politics. Today, we're going to be discussing capitalism, socialism, and just politics in general, really, the state of the planet and stuff. Not too formal, not too casual. Hopefully, things will stay nice and pleasant, and it can entertain you for the evening.
Well,
Take it away,
hopefully
Sparky.
so. All right. Dazzy said, I am Aircraft Sparky. You can find me on Twitter at aircraftsparky.com. You can also find me on my YouTube channel, Aircraft Sparky. Every Wednesday night, we usually hold around 8 p.m. Central. We hold Thursday night streams on Wednesday nights. This is where we look over at current events. We read stories. We give each other's opinions depending on who my guests are. We make fun of the shit because why? Life's a little bit too short to take everything seriously. Tonight, I will be discussing the benefits of capitalism, because capitalism freaking rocks, because I am a toxic capitalist, against my socialist opponent here, Owen McDonald. And this should be a lively debate discussing many things from economic models to history. I am excited about it, and I am looking forward to a great and open-minded debate with Mr. McDonald here. Thank you for hosting me again, and let's get this show on the road.
Excellent. Not a problem hosting you. It seems like you got a lot to say. So would you like to begin, or shall I?
Go ahead, man.
Okay. So I think when it comes to anti-capitalism, the reason so many people in society take umbrage with the system is because at its core, it relies on the exploitation and mistreatment of human lives. So the system fundamentally is the idea that to function in society, you should profit off commodities. You have capital and you want to increase that capital through the profiting of commodities. And you'll notice there's no distinction or line drawn there. There's no definition of what a commodity is. Therefore, a commodity can be anything, which we see today, in which people have to, compete to survive for things that should be readily available to them. Looking at the planet today, there's no reason people should be going hungry and be unable to access food, because we have more food than people. We can feed everyone on the planet easily if we distribute things fairly and evenly. However, we see food destroyed because it won't sell for anything, while people starve. You can look at water, for instance. There's enough water and produce and food to go around for everyone, yet we see massive shortages in some parts of the world and abundance of resources in other parts of the world, and controlled by certain people. We look at wealth and who owns most of the land. That's all controlled by a finite group of people. And you'll notice these people are the ruling class, the class that are able to control the rest of the populace, the rest of the world, and subject it to their conditions. The idea that capitalism has produced a better, freer world is one that ignores not only the workers who fought for better conditions against the capitalist system, but the sort of state the planet's heading in. We look at environmentally, the sort of devastating effects that capitalism is having on the planet, where we're seeking to maximize profits and disregarding the world around us. We can look at the effect fossil fuels have had on the planet, and the farming industry has ravaged the environment and ecological habitats of many creatures. Yet, we're justifying this because it makes profits for private individuals and for corporations. We look at the treatment of workers in Southeast Asia and in other areas of the world where TNCs can put factories and sweatshops, and they make billions from it. And they, under the capitalist system, there's a success because they've maximized their profits. But, you look at the human cost of that, and it's atrocious. People living in poverty conditions who are in these dismal jobs they can't escape because there's no other alternative. The entire system is built on exploitation and theft of labor, and takes the work of the workers and distributes the produce to the wealthy, the ruling class. And fundamentally, we need to realize that politically, environmentally, economically, and socially, our system needs to change if we are to progress as a species and to improve the planet.
Okay, fair enough. Well, let me try to hit on these things. So you talked about different commodities. In capitalism, everything is looked at a commodity, and honestly, to a point, you are right. I mean, anything from manpower and such is all forms of commodity. In fact, if you're a skilled laborer, tradesman, engineer, professional, yes, your time is worth money. It is a commodity because you are a specialist in your area. As far as food shortages, here's the deal. What do you consider to be an equal distribution of food across the deal? And really, what regions are going to be responsible for what type of output, and where all will it go? When you talk about the environmental impacts of capitalism, is it truly capitalism that is really the thing at fault here, and not just advances in technology? Because honestly, I don't know if capitalism actually is to blame for the Industrial Revolution. Even though I would say, hey, if it is, bravo capitalism, because I think living in the dark ages and burning whale oil wasn't a very sustainable method of keeping things going. So for as many things as people can fault capitalism for, if you really want to say, hey, if it wasn't for capitalism, the Industrial Revolution wouldn't have happened, you're welcome. Sub-poverty conditions. You were talking about places like in East Asia where there are sweatshops and larger corporations that will utilize this quote-unquote slave labor, this cheaper labor. Honestly, that is labor that is within the realm scope of laws within those individual countries. Even though I do not agree with such exploitation of workers, I understand why it exists. The biggest problem that I have with socialism is the fact that, by theory, you talk as if it's like rule by committee, and that doesn't work because too many cooks spoil the broth. Eventually, someone is going to step up as the ruler, as the leader, even though that may not be the initial intention. That is the way it always happens. Someone who is charismatic is always going to rise to the top and start becoming the voice for that group. So depending on, when you look at different cultures and different countries around the world, there's going to be leaders of those different groups, those different cultures that are going to step up and say, hey, I am the leader. And people are going to defer to that person's voice. Capitalism itself is truly just an economic model. It's not horrible. True, granted, there are some things that can be improved upon it. But all at the same time, every socialist model that has ever come out has always failed. And it's because people are corrupt. And yes, there is corruption within capitalism, undoubtedly. But it's easier to control under a capitalist deal because the state itself does not have ultimate control over everything. You have such things as the power of the pocketbook, where you can sit there and say, you know what, I don't support this company, and you can forfeit buying commodities from them, and you can find alternatives. If everything just completely sucks for you as the worker, and you're just like, you know what, I think I could do this better, you can strike off on your own. Will it be easy? No, but life is not supposed to be easy. And the F word, fair. Fair is not something that exists in the world. Ask any billionaire. They will tell you life isn't fair. Life is hard, son. Get a helmet.
Okay. So you said a lot there, and I feel as though we should, instead of sort of trying to address every point we make all at once, we should focus in on like an individual area and then like come back to a point later on. So like, I've written down some of the stuff you mentioned, and perhaps you can sort of elaborate on one of the points and move on to the next one in time. Okay, so where shall we start?
Start at the beginning. When we get to the end, we'll stop.
Okay. So the idea that everything is a commodity. Now, a commodity, the idea that everything should have a price on it and should be able to be profited off and sold and can be used in a market is one that essentially devalues the human condition and sees life as a series of transactions when there's no need for it to be. So, for instance, you described an engineer or a technician or something, like jobs which are obviously going to have a high salary behind them because they're very lucrative on the free market. Now, that is one type of labor, and it's a labor that can help people, but that shouldn't mean that they receive a better life than other people who don't necessarily have those skills in that particular field. Like, we shouldn't be relegating human life just because they can't perform a certain skill. people have skills in other departments, and no one should be denied, basic tools to a healthy, fair, happy life based on that. Like, people have different skills in different areas. So the person
Agreed.
who isn't exactly, but then under capitalism, we base it on a free market. So the person who's maybe good at like arts and cultural stuff and history, they might not be able to pursue their interests and what they're best at because the free market decides it's not that good. You could have someone who's like a really talented musician, but they're not suddenly going to be able to access their dreams and what they'd be potentially the best at, because it turns out the music industry is pretty much dominated by those with wealth and those who are connected. So they end up having their talent squandered because the free market prices them out of getting a living in that, and they get lost. Because obviously they could just pursue it as a hobby, but then they're not selling their labor hours to pay for the goods they need to survive, because capitalism forces workers to sell their labor. Otherwise they wouldn't have access to the basics of life privately owned. Anyway, I'll let you come in and respond to that.
Okay, well, I actually used to play music professionally. I was regionally signed by a record company, and I used to tour. I know how the music industry works. 0.2% of all people who play music get signed by one of those big record labels. In fact, one of my close friends got signed by them. You may know him as Brad, the lead singer of Three Doors Down. I used to, play hacky sack with him out at college. So here's the deal. No, just because that may be your talent, you may not be good enough. Okay, there's a reason why there's only a very small percentage of those who play baseball or cricket or whatever sports you follow that actually makes a professional stage. It's because they're either not that good or there is that deal called luck. Yeah, I lost a battle of the bands with Three Doors Down, and you know what? I'm okay with that. I was offered a position in their band later, and I turned it down, mainly because I was serving in the military in that time, and I could not get out of my contract even if I wanted to. But that's okay. That was a decision that I made. Life is competition, Owen. If you look at things, you want to be the best at what you do. So if you are one of those people who rise to the top in your field, shouldn't you be considered worth more than others if you put in more work? If you look at people who are like engineers or technicians who have to go through some specialized school, shouldn't their time and labor be worth more than someone who is, I don't know, begging you to buy lemon pledge to clean your house? I mean, let's be honest. Not everyone contributes the same amount to society. The farmer may give food to the world, and that's a great thing. But the best farmers will give food to a country, to a larger area. They should probably get a little bit more. It really depends on how good you are at what you do. That should determine how worth your time is. You don't sit there and go, hey, who's the cheapest person I can do to build my house? No, you're like, who's the best that I can afford to build my house? We want the best. We want the most, the people with the most integrity to do work for us, So yes, there are going to be skills. There's going to be people who are going to just suck at their job. There are doctors who are terrible doctors. So yes, we want the best, and the better people should get paid more. It is part of competition. Go ahead.
Sorry, my audio cut out there.
No,
okay,
I didn't cut out.
No, my audio.
Oh, okay.
But no, it was okay. I mean, I was just sorting out some of my earphones. It wasn't you. Anyway,
right on.
So to go back to the start of what I was saying, what you were saying, even. You mentioned the sort of select tier of people that make it to the top or summit or money making tier of the music industry. And yeah, no one's saying that every single person who can play a guitar should be world famous and stuff. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that because only a select tier are going to be recognized by a free market doesn't mean that they should have their experience negated and suffered for it. Like the fact that you produce profit for a shareholder of a company like Sony or any of the other major labels shouldn't mean that your life experience and life is negated by that. Like, there's no reason for someone's human life to be put on the free market as a commodity. Your labor shouldn't be something you have to sell to better your experience of life, for instance.
But that's actually the goal. That's actually the goal of the entertainment industry.
But no, exactly,
it's to sell that person's talent. I mean, that's what they do.
Yeah, that's the goal of a free market, but there's no reason for that to continue under a better system where maybe instead of making the prime incentive money, we have it as talent and enjoyment of the genre. Like, for instance, you look at all the genres of music that there are, and the ones that make money and sell, that, you know, actively negates the potential exploration of certain genres of music just based on what makes money. Like, there's a reason, for instance, so many people are so disenfranchised with mainstream music, because a lot of it is just really similar stuff that just sells the most that we can. Like, which is why there's so many like vapid, seemingly rubbish singers, which still make billions because of the market that the free market focuses on.
But that money is actually driven off of actual sales, and that's where the difference comes up. I mean, you can have some great musicians that don't make it big, but it's because they're not putting themselves out there for marketing. They're not.
Exactly, though. They're not putting themselves out there for marketing. And if they,
well, you know, that's on them.
But if they want the help of like Sony will say, well, no, you're not going to write about this. You're not going to perform like this. You're going to perform this song that we've done for you, or meet this genre. And then their creative talent is either lost to the corporation, or, you know, they ignore it, but then they've not got the advertising power and like exposure that these massive corporations can offer them. Like, so the market is dominated by corporations, which then control what gets produced.
But those markets are also those larger corporations have also put in all of the marketing research and stuff to actually know. I was talking to Brad years ago, and I was making fun of how they quote unquote sold out when they signed on to their record label. And he said, what you don't understand is, yes, we did sell out, and we did it because we made more money that way. And exactly. I can't argue that, okay? Because that was their goal, playing music, was to make money. They wanted to make a living on it. So why not maximize the profits?
Well, of course, yeah, but can't you see that you know, negates the actual value and quality of the music? If they're, you know, if they literally just said we did it for the money, like, of course that's what's going to happen under capitalism. That's why so many people sign up to these record labels. Of course, they, like, in the ideal proper scenario, you'd be writing your own music and, you know, having creative control yourself, and not having to erase songs from your playlist because the corporation said, no, this won't sell as much. But under capitalism, if you don't agree to what the people financing your marketing do, then you lose out. And surely you can see that negatively affects the industry, because all of a sudden you have people who could be amazing, like if they were, you know, not having to compete on the free market and didn't have the pressure of being homeless and starving without being on the capitalist market.
What's amazing about that part, though, is that let's just look at my buddies 3 Doors Down. If they really wanted to stay to originally what they played, which is honestly just slightly a bit harder rock, what they would have done is, once their first album went platinum and they got out of their contract, they did not have to sign another contract. Those contracts are only for a specific amount of records, a specific amount of time, what have you, and tours. So once they're released from that, they have the capital to start their own record label. While it might be smaller, they have some insider knowledge on how the actual industry works, and they could cherry pick people from Sony and actually, hey, we're doing a startup. One of the amazing things you see in capitalism is the fact that once people learn the businesses, they leave the big corporations and they start their own small business and they try to make it. Now, not all make it, but others do. There are some. You have that opportunity, where in socialistic areas where you have the state control, there is no individual freedom. Well, there is no chance for it.
I mean, firstly, like, socialism it doesn't have a state. Like, it's the idea that you abolish the existence of the, you know, class tiering of society and the state.
But that isn't the way it ever pans out.
But that doesn't, like, you know, that's not, well, firstly, that's not true. But secondly, that wouldn't defeat the point that you can't just call something socialist if it doesn't actually meet the criteria that makes it socialist. But going back to what you were saying, of course, this your band colleagues and stuff, the people you knew, of course they're going to take the option that offers them more money because that's more security in the free market. That means they're less likely to have to face the exactly. But can't you see that is obviously overriding the actual point of the industry, like music and stuff?
But it was a decision that they made.
Yeah, because of the capitalist system around them. Like it wasn't.
It's not necessarily just capitalism. I mean, come on, everything in nature is going to take the least path of resistance. That is like Ohm's law, rule number 1 is electricity will follow the least path of resistance. People will too. The easier things are, the more chances that a person is going to gravitate towards that answer.
Do you see that this is under capitalism though? Like you've under capitalism, you sell your labor, you get a wage in response to that, and obviously your wage pays for the things you need to live and rent and stuff. And if you're lucky, if you make enough money, then you can afford some luxuries and stuff. And your band members, clearly like acting as most people are going to, they want security for their lives and their families, so they go for sacrificing their potential careers in music or where they want to be going to a career in music that doesn't necessarily allow them as much freedom, but gives them a better place on the free market. Yeah, maybe it works out for them and they're okay with it because who wouldn't be? But for lots of people, they're not going to be able to make that transition. They're not going to want to lose the whole point they went into the music industry to make their music just to serve the profits of those above them. But under capitalism, that creative license is completely quashed because all of a sudden you've lost. And this isn't unique to music. It's like with anything. If you don't meet what the corporate giants want you to be producing for them, you don't have that marketing power. Like, and you can say, "Oh yeah, just make your own company," but that's not what happens, is it? Because if you look at the size and colossal sort of scale of corporations in the capitalist market, it's one or two, or a select group that control all the wealth, and companies that eventually just get bought up by larger companies because they can't afford to run themselves. Like video games is a prime example of this, where we see a company like EA buy up thousands of small companies because they can't compete on the market anymore.
Okay, now let me ask you this: do you know many business owners?
Sorry,
know many business owners?
Like personally, or
yes.
Not really. I mean, maybe like
okay.
1 or 2. But
I know. I personally know a couple of people who have started their own recording companies. I know some people in the tech industry who makes video games and stuff. And you know what their dream is? To be bought out. That's why they made the whole company. The whole idea of the company was to build it up just enough to get their attention from the larger corporations and sell out. That is their retirement plan. But you got to understand, there is still tons of businesses that are predicated based on that solely. Okay, just because you build it to sell it off.
But that's of course, because that's under capitalism. But because you want security for yourself and your family on the free market. Like, do you see that this is existing in a network of capitalism? Like, and this goes against the idea that you're in the industry to make the industry better and improve video games. Do you see, like, for instance, imagine?
I understand what you're saying, but I think okay. So I've got to ask you this: is your goal, since you're not a fan of capitalism, okay? Do you dislike capitalism because you think that it is ultimately an inferior process, or is it because you haven't found a way to manipulate it into your own benefit yet? well, I mean, come on, it has to be an honest question.
Well,
because
no,
I honestly understand there are problems with the system. However, I am more willing to manipulate it into something that I can deem better and make it better out for me.
No, but I'm not saying necessarily that you're a bad person for, taking the money route over the purely what you want to do route. Like, that's what most people end up having to do. And certainly your friends who started up businesses, I'm not saying, they're bad or anything for wanting to, secure their future and have wealth for themselves. But can you not see that this ultimately harms the industry of video games? Because, they wanted to be bought out. They wanted the big company to buy the company and secure their financial future. But the potential output of that, or the outcome of that, sorry, is that that's another, you know, company that's controlled by a major corporation. That's another potential output of creativity lost to EA or Ubisoft, or a company that's, you know, going to have really awful practices. I mean, I don't know if you know much about the video game industry, but the tales of what developers go through to meet the, you know, demands of a profit of like EA and stuff is horrific. Like workers being, you know, going well into overtime that's underpaid. These like terrible deadlines which you know, harm the actual quality of the product they're making. These you know, microtransactions, just awful ways of making the product worse to maximize profit. And because these companies have such control of the industry, there's no actual way of curtailing them, because, you know, they have so much wealth and power that you're not going to really see much progress. And it's the same with any market, really. TV, where TV studios, in America at least, it's like what, 4 companies which have like any power in the market. And to draw us back to socialism in a way, we should be moving past the idea that society needs to run on this profit system, and instead be allowing people to express themselves and be themselves with their art and stuff how they wish, and without the fear of, you know, dying because they weren't able to sell their labor on the free market. We should decommodify life, and, you know, free it from the idea that everything is a commodity. And thus the improvement would be that anyone who wants to be like do music is able to express themselves and pursue that without necessarily like knowing their hobby will be curtailed by the free market. They don't need to be massively like popular. They need to be like an Ed Sheeran type being sold by loads of people, but it's going to have a much wider berth of people able to indulge and enjoy the thing they like, video games. Imagine if people making video games were doing it because they enjoyed making video games and they wanted to be there, and not just because, you know, they wanted to try and survive the free market, or because it was the only job option they had. Like, there's always, to say, oh yeah, it's all right because people just want to make money, is to ignore the sort of network of capitalism that's around it, and sort of fundamentally ignores the questions that's being asked, really.
Usually the people that excel in their chosen profession, whatever it may be, it's usually because they have a passion for it. A football player, a professional football player, everyone goes, oh, well, they have such an easy life. Well, no, they're constantly training. They're constantly working.
Of course.
If you're not willing to put in that sweat equity, you're not going to have even a minimal chance of reaching those higher platforms. Same thing with the music industry. Guess what? In gaming software, I guarantee you that there is no one who works in gaming software development that doesn't have some sort of passion for it. Because if not, they would be an IT person working for about $9 an hour. Because everyone and their cousin is a frickin', you know, wants to be a computer science major and stuff like that. As the market becomes overwhelmed with people who want to be in that career field, the value of it depletes because of supply and demand. So the deal is, the people who end up staying for the long term actually do have a passion for it. And yes, they value the time, they value the effort. I'm sorry. Well, no, I'm not. I'm not sorry one damn bit that a garbage person doesn't make as much money as an engineer, or an engineer doesn't make as much as a doctor, because the initial investment that got them to that level of time and effort and money and everything else to get them through the education is completely different and in no way equal. Okay, if you dig a ditch for a living, you may be bringing an important service to your community. However, it is nowhere near as important as a doctor who has to know the chemistry and everything and the biology in order to diagnose disease. It's nowhere near as important as the engineer that is putting him or herself liably in charge of whatever structure they sign off on, and could be held criminally and civilly responsible for any damage that their design produces. So
right, okay.
Part of the cost of the labor is the liability involved with it.
Okay, so a lot said there. you go back to what you said about passion. It's all very well saying, oh yeah, they want to make it to the top are obviously the best, but again, you already said earlier on that the people who make it to those elevated positions with EA or Ubisoft or Activision and stuff are those who were most willing to accept the conditions. So in many ways, this isn't actually true because I mean, you look at someone like Hideo Kojima, who's someone a really talented video game designer, but he's independent now because the corporation he worked for, Konami, has no interest in curtailing their profits for the whims of Hideo Kojima. It doesn't matter how good a developer he is, Kojima is out of the window, and that's the case for a lot of people who dislike the corporation. So the idea that the best people are going to be the ones left at the top is not even true.
Well,
but then if you'd just let me address all of what you said there, because there was a lot. Like you said, passion doesn't matter next to the profits of the corporation. The idea of capitalism is making profits with what you have, and you can make the best pitch ever for your amazing game, but if it's not going to make the corporation profits, they're not interested, and that curtails the actual quality of the industry. And to come on to what you were saying about jobs, the garbage man contributes less to society. Well, that's not even true. Everyone's labor contributes to everyone else's labor. That doctor does not exist without the labor of everyone else around him. The food they eat, the technology they use, the education they've had, it all comes from other people's labor. So for them to be elevated to a position of wealth, and then the rest who were just as responsible for the labor of the doctor to be left in the dust, basically, is ridiculous. Imagine if you were saying, oh, farmers, they only do a bit, or garbage people, they only clean the roads and stuff. Imagine if their jobs didn't happen, if their labor is just removed. All of a sudden, you've got festering piles of rubbish everywhere. You've got populations without any access to food because the food transportation system's gone, and the farmers aren't around to grow the food anymore. Everyone's labor is necessary for society to function. And what's more, automation is a major thing. The jobs of 1,000 workers can now be done by one worker operating a machine. We're entering a stage where selling our labor on the free market is just simply going to leave people in the dust. And in a way, that shows you that capitalism isn't going to be able to, even in its current form, maintain the production it has today, which we're already seeing because we're seeing poverty rise in the West, and we're seeing capitalism enter its decaying stage.
It's really not the capitalism itself is failing; it's the fact that people are failing to adapt.
No, but that's
part of the human condition is the ability to adapt to the environments in which they are in. So if you fail to take the time to get educated to adapt to the evolving technology, well, that's on you.
But there's not enough jobs, though, is there?
No, there are plenty of jobs. Okay, for those robots that are building cars or whatever, as technology tends to advance and less physical workers are needed. Whatever happened to the guy who was putting the bolts? The 5 bolts on the tire. Oh, well, they got a machine to do that. Cool. Well, who fixes the machine?
Another machine.
No.
Yeah. Well,
I work in the industry of machinery, and no matter how advanced AI has gotten so far, it still can't troubleshoot as well as a person because machines don't know when to see what is erroneous yet. They haven't figured that out. As soon as they get that, yes, there will be a chance that even my type of jobs will disappear. But
do you understand
this amazing thing called education, if you pursue that and you move beyond that and you adapt to the ever-changing technological environment, then you keep yourself relevant. Now, let me ask you this. Last night I touched on this. In socialism, well, really in anything, there is a condition called social loafing. It is where you allow the rest of the group to take up your slack. So in a capitalist society, what normally happens to those who are habitual social loafers is they starve, they wither, they die. Yes, not nice. But hey, reality is, if you want a cookie, you got to work for it. Nothing in life is free. The free lunch theory is there is no such thing as free lunch. So let me ask you, in a socialist society, theoretically, idealistically, because I'll concede that no true socialist government has, or no true socialist entity has truly existed in the world. How does that get dealt with?
I'll come on to that in a second. But you said something very interesting a second ago when you said, as soon as it's possible, my job will eventually be replaced. And that's the idea. That's what's going to happen. And it's already happened to lots of jobs in society. It's in the best interest of capitalists to be maximizing profit, because that's that's the nature of capitalism. You want to be making profit
but you have to adapt and overcome.
No, but you can't, because like you said, your job's going to be replaced. Like they're not going to need your labor, because they've got a machine that can do your work for cheaper than what you would need. They don't have to pay a machine a wage. And yeah, you can say, oh yeah, get educated, but that tier of human labor that's needed is going to get smaller and smaller, and is getting smaller and smaller. What was once, you can say, oh yeah, people to fix a machine, but that's not the same as a whole. Like imagine like a dockyard. What was once thousands of workers lugging cargo around is now a few machines, and maybe there's like a technician who comes and looks at it once in a while. But the fact there's like massive communities that now have no work and thus don't have a access to society.
But that's because they failed to adapt.
But that's like how they're going to adapt, though, because let's look at the conditions capitalism places on them. Education, once you go past schooling age, costs. And even in schooling age, if you're not in a wealthy area, your education is going to be severely hampered. The time you're putting into education is time you're not selling your labor hours on the free market. So suddenly you have less money and you can't afford food, rent, electricity. Like all these things that you need to survive have a price on them because of the private ownership of society. So you're paying with your labor to access them. So what time do you have to get educated? There is none, because if you're putting that time into seeking like these courses, you can't access the basic survival in life and stuff.
Like, are you sure about that?
Yes, absolutely. Like you make it sound as though like, oh, you can just escape poverty and like escape the capitalist system just by getting educated, and that ignores the tiers and barriers that are around there. You also have to consider that it's in the best interest of those on top to remain at the top, and the ruling class, the wealthy, aren't just going to like
that's in every society that has ever existed. Those who are
capitalism
type, or no, not just capitalism.
Of course, yeah, but capitalism.
Everyone who is on top always wants to remain on top. Let me tell you a little story about a man named me. Okay, I worked in the commercial industry for quite a while in aviation, and I decided, one day I looked at my wife and said, I don't have enough of a future right now because, well, I'm never going to move up into supervision or anything like that because, well, I don't have anyone to pull me up, because I'm not related to anyone here. So I left the workforce. I did that for about 3 years. I went from making 6 figures by myself annually and went back to school. Okay. I made the time. If it's important enough, you can do it. You can sacrifice.
You just said you made 6 figures, yeah?
Yes.
So you've got that money to spend on education. So of course it's
I didn't save.
Sorry?
I didn't save. I partied like a fucking rock star, let me tell you. I could walk into a Best Buy and buy anything I wanted at any time. That's the way I lived. I didn't live paycheck to paycheck, but I sure as hell didn't have a whole lot saved up.
And do you think the working class have access to this, regardless of whether you save or not?
The government paid for me to go to college.
Well, exactly. Like
the government paid because I sacrificed years of my life in defense of my country. It was a benefit granted to me by honorable service in the United States military. It wasn't free. It took several years. It took a lot of pain.
You made the American government profit through their actions abroad, and thus they rewarded you with a grant to university. And
no, it was actually part of the contract I signed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm describing that. Yeah, no, I'm describing that.
I didn't make the America money. I actually spent a lot of America's money.
If you were in the armed forces and the army, the purpose of the army is protect and defend and carry out the actions of the state internationally, and the purpose of the state is to make America as good as it can be and thus make it profit. If you look at the actions of America globally, its intention is to further and sustain and keep on growing American capitalism, which is why you see all these the war in Iraq, the actions in Latin America, So yeah, you served your country, but you serving that country was you providing America with greater access to capital in your small way. And I'm not saying you literally marched into countries and like put the American flag down and stuff, but
Oh, I did some places.
well, exactly. Like you literally helped them accrue more capital. Literally, if you're saying you literally did like have an American flag and put it into the land and stuff, like you're helping them make profits. So in return for your labor, they give you an education. But
I also pissed in every major waterway that I came across, just to mark my territory. I did it in London. It was great.
yeah, coming back to what I was saying, like it's all part of capitalism. You sold your labor, so you got stuff in return for it. But the way you've got your education and thus entered what I'm guessing is a very financially secure future for yourself. Yeah, but that's like stuff that people can't access otherwise. How is a working class person going to, firstly have a position to earn six-figure salaries, get like pay for their education, be fit enough to serve in the military, be willing to do all these things that you've had the luxury of sort of doing, which isn't to say that you've coasted through life or anything, but you have like things have gone well. You're able-bodied, for instance, I assume anyway.
Well, I was.
Yeah, exactly. But you were when you served in the military, I'm guessing.
Well, not everyone can serve in the military, and I mean that's just granted. I mean that's just the nature of the job. You have to be physically fit in order to do it.
But, exactly,
but there are many programs out there, at least in America. I don't know enough about the UK structures, but there are plenty of programs out there for people to raise themselves out of poverty through grants and whatever to get educated. What I do for a living is really nothing all that different than many other people before me. Any trained monkey can do what I do for a living. The fact is, you got to go through the trouble to get trained. And a lot of people just don't want to put in that sweat equity. That's really what it boils down to. Is a lot of people just go, no, I don't want to put in that effort. It's not that they can't put in that effort. There is, when it comes to education in America, yes, it's a little pricey. But I'll tell you this, if someone tells you they can't, it really just means that they won't. Because between student loan programs, between grants and everything else, if you can't go to college, it is just because you don't have the drive to do it yourself. A lot of states also have for their first 2 years of college for free now. So if you can't at least get a 2-year college degree in America, that is because of where you choose to live and your inability to choose to get educated.
Well, firstly, people can't choose where they live. I mean, I don't know if you know about the housing situation in the US and the sort of rising of the high prices in better, like more wealthy areas.
I don't live in a wealthy area, and I did not grow up here. Okay,
yeah, this is not, like we've already established. You've got
Russia, where you had to have a passport to go from city to city. You have freedom of movement.
Yes, now, but you're going to be in
it is not always free and easy. But the deal about it is, you have that opportunity. You can save up. If it is nothing more than you working at McDonald's for 6 months to save up enough money for you to get into a bus and go to someplace else and try, you have that opportunity. But people are not always willing to put that risk out.
But do you realize how absurd what you're saying is? Like, get on a bus and go somewhere else, and you arrive and there's no land, and you can't. Where are you going to stay? Like,
no risk, no reward. People do it all the time.
You're going to risk that, and they end up homeless. Like, you can't just.
There's a lot of people in Hollywood who have started their career with nothing more than getting on a bus from wherever they grew up, came all the way to Hollywood, and did nothing but shit jobs and waitering and waitressing in order to be discovered. And now they're multi-million-dollar actors and actresses. Okay. The deal about America is, with risk comes reward. There is that opportunity for failure, but you know what? Failure is not always a bad thing. Failure sometimes is a positive thing, because it will teach you what you did wrong if you pay attention. But you can learn from failures.
It's all very well saying that for like a video game or like a piece of art or something, but when it's like actual like human lives, like that's not the case. If you fail, then on the free market, then your conditions in society are going to get far worse. And what you're saying is, I find it quite insulting, really, to suggest that people can just get on a bus and like shoot off like to some random city and make a name for themselves. Who's going to like deprive themselves of what little lives they have, barely getting by on minimum wage jobs?
Thousands of people have done it before.
Yeah, and millions more have like realized that that's not the case. Like, look at like we've already established, like the free market knows only profit. They're not going to care about the plight of people working.
You're right.
Exactly.
But
so there's no
if you
way
don't take the risks, though. The deal is, you've got to take risks sometimes to get ahead in life. Everything is not safe. You can't just sit there and goes on some predetermined plan and become successful. You got to stick your neck out there sometimes. If you're not willing to take those risks, then you'll live a mediocre life. And I mean, it is what it is. Just addressing chat real quick. Social Revolution says the Army also tends to be in the industry itself, producing weapons to make profits.
Sorry to cut you off. Should we focus? We can come to the chat in a bit if you want, but should we focus on the discussion at hand so we don't get too sidetracked, if that's all right?
Well, I just really wanted to address this because this is something I actually know about personally. The Army is not an industry. The Army they don't produce anything. Those are done by government contractors. No, they do not produce weapons. They do work alongside of designing weapon systems and stuff, and they will approve weapon systems, but they themselves do not design and they themselves do not produce. The industrial military complex is a farce. It is nothing more than a group of companies that are considered government contractors who manufacture weapons and weapon system platforms. They're no cabal. They are competing contractors to sell equipment to the government. And some contractors tend to fare better because they tend to make a product that people who will be utilizing their weapons tend to like more. And that's really as far as I'm going to go into that. But go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so like you were saying, these people, like the people who are not earning much, they're minimum wage, they have no access to improving their lives, because like we've already established, it's in the best interest for capitalists to be making the most profit they can. So they don't want working class people to be making more, because that's the more they make, the less those on top have. So it's in their best interest to keep them in their the current situation. And you can say, oh yeah, you could just go on a bus and risk everything to show up somewhere, but that's just obviously not going to work. Because yeah, fine, maybe it worked for like the odd actor here and there, but for every one it works for, the other like 100,000 it wouldn't work for. It's obvious that that's not going to happen.
There's people who are willing to take that chance though, for that dream.
Why do you think there's so many homeless people? Like you can't. Can you not see that if you're like, oh yeah, you might become Ben Affleck, but most likely you're going to end up being like homeless, and you've lost connection to everyone. That's ridiculous.
But if they made that choice, isn't that their responsibility?
No, but that's the point. No one's going to make that choice because it's very obviously going to go wrong. Because you can't just show up somewhere and you've got nowhere to stay. You've got no access to a job because you're not got an address.
Well, if someone wouldn't make that choice, then there wouldn't be bands like Guns N' Roses, Metallica. There wouldn't be rappers like Eazy-E and stuff like that. Okay, these are people who actually did make those choices, who came from nothing.
They got lucky, basically.
But they took that chance. You're saying no one is going to. I'm throwing out examples of those who have. People take those chances. Many fail, but they made that decision. They made that decision to take that risk, and you should not pity them for a decision that they made as a cognizant being.
They made that risk because of the conditions of capitalism. Can you not see this? But people have to, people do take these risks because of the misery around them, because they need to, get out of the horrid conditions that capitalism creates. Like, coming back to what you said, something about, earlier, like about how, my job could be done by that as soon as it becomes automated, it will. Like, that's what's going to happen. Like, and these people, like the dockyards I was mentioning earlier in Baltimore, in Michigan, not Michigan, Chicago and New York, all these places where we once had like booming dock-good industries. Suddenly, there's these entire communities of impoverished people because their jobs have been replaced by robots. They've got no access to selling their labor. If they tried to, change their labor previously, they're going to be priced out of it because they can't. You can't like. No one's got enough time to have enough money to survive by selling your labor and also pursue educations at a college somewhere, because this isn't like anyone can tell you that college is demanding. You need to put time into studying and stuff, and if that time is going into that, then you're not going to be able to sell your labor. And additionally, someone in the chat's pointed out that it's not just that it's like going to places. Transportation costs as well, and if you're trying to go to like a new city, that's going to cost you stuff as well.
That's why you work and you save money.
But
you
save
don't
money
do everything
how?
on a whim.
Save money how? It's all right when it's you and you can, you're earning six-figure salary.
I don't know how many jobs you've worked at one time, but when I was going to college up until this past December, I was going to college full time, plus working 2 jobs and taking care of my family while hosting my own channel and doing shows. It's really all about time management. Sure, I sacrificed a lot of sleep, but I did it because that's what I wanted to do and I wanted to make the money.
Yes, but you said yourself you're on a 6-figure salary, so clearly it's easier.
I was on a 6-figure salary. Not once I started to go to college. I was on a 0-figure salary.
You said you were working 2 jobs.
Yes, when I was working, I was making about $15,000 because I was working 2 part-time jobs, going to school full-time. Now, I was getting paid by the U.S. military for going to school. But prior to that, prior to leaving the workforce, yes, I was making 6 figures. I was making 6 figures, working 7 days a week without a day off, working 14-hour days.
Yes, and do you see how those conditions have clearly put you in a better position to be able to pursue the further education and training to reach the position you are now?
Yes, but had I not taken the time to get the initial training to be able to get the first technical job to where I could actually make the 6 figures, yeah, it probably would have been a lot harder. But you know what? I took the time. I made the effort. A lot of people don't even do that much.
I know, but how are they going to be able to? It's not that they they don't care for it. Of course, they'd love to be able to pursue their own field and where they want to go in life at a college. But there's no access to that because they're working all the time to survive, or they're not in a position to
real quick in chat, Esper, 2 jobs plus going to school full time. Bullshit. No, not really. All you have to do is schedule morning classes and work evenings, and you work 2 separate jobs on different nights. You don't work them back to back. It's really not that hard. 14-hour days plus school full time. You're right. I did not work full time, working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, plus go to school. No, I slept. I spent very minimal time with my wife. You are right. No, I am not a liar. You were just sitting there ad homing and straw manning me. So take your troll ass out of the chat or shut the fuck up and listen. Bye-bye. All right, Owen, back to you.
I think it was just more confusion over school and college and stuff. I don't know. I guess they must have thought you were at school doing all this. Anyway, so what was I saying? You've clearly been in a position to do this because you had the university grant, you had the military stuff, you had money coming in, and yeah, fine, you weren't earning 6 figures at college and stuff, but you clearly had a lot of conditions go your way. Imagine, for instance, the people who are in poverty-ridden areas trying to get through a education system that's been clearly defunded and doesn't have the resources to give you a proper education. Got an environment at home where from an early age you're having to dedicate time to either selling your own labor or looking after the family, and not being able to get by, because it's not as easy as just trotting off to a college. There's also the geographical element of it. You have to actually get to your college. It's all very well if it's you got money and you can afford to rent a apartment and stuff, but lots of people aren't going to be able to do that because turns out renting apartments is quite expensive, and taking out a loan, that's really risky. Like there's so many people who are literally on the streets because they took out a loan which they couldn't afford to pay back, because it turns out that, like you said, the free market isn't there's not enough jobs for everyone. Like, which is another thing we need to come on to, like automation. The fact that there's not enough jobs for people to work, and there's not enough jobs to let alone just work. There's not enough jobs to have a life that lives above the poverty line. Like, we look at the number, like there's barely, like most states don't even have a minimum wage which meets the poverty level. Some states don't even have a minimum wage, for instance. Like, I think in the deep south, many of the Republican states don't have a minimum wage. Like
no, there's a federal minimum wage across America. It doesn't matter what state you live in, there is a minimum wage.
Okay, fair enough. My mistake then. However, it's still vastly below the living wage, and it doesn't even account for like healthcare and stuff. Like, imagine, obviously, the situation with healthcare in America is so diabolical that it's another fault of the capitalist system. But coming back to what you were saying, the idea that people can just escape the poverty conditions capitalism places on them is completely naive of the day-to-day whims and problems that people face under capitalism. Like, it's easy to say this from your position when it's all happened for you with a lot of it through your own work, but also the conditions that have been blessed upon you. And that's not to say you're bad or anything. That's just a recognition that some people have it easier than others. Like, the fact that you were able to go to college at all shows that you have a position of privilege over a lot of American people, because the people in America, certainly in some working class areas, are never going to have that access because they just don't have the funds. They're pouring all their time into selling their labor to buying food, paying rent.
Well, ultimately, you are a culmination of the decisions you make.
But that's not the case, though, because if you're born into a poverty-ridden area,
I know plenty of people who have come out of poverty-ridden areas and actually been quite successful.
Yeah, adhering.
Your starting point has nothing to do with your end point. It is what happens in between that truly matters.
That's not even true, though, because there's plenty of people who are hardworking and will put in amazing.
It's not just about hard work. Sometimes there are times where you have to make risks, and a lot of people are risk adverse.
Why would you take a risk that is most likely going to fail? Like you said, like, most people aren't going to be that. Like you said, 0.2% of people in the music industry will have 0.2% of people who start out in the music industry get to the top level. Mm-hmm. That's like, with various chances. What, 1 in 500, I believe that is. Like, who's going to take that? Yeah, who's going to take that risk? Oh, you may have
people.
Yeah,
in fact, Queen Bee, old Beyonce, in her golden toilet, loving self.
Yeah, and everyone, for every Beyonce, there's 5, according to this statistic, 5.
Yeah, there's 500.
People who didn't make it. Yeah. So why would you take that risk? If you're telling, surely you can see your faults in what you're saying here. You're not gonna take this risk. It's clearly not gonna pay off. A 1 in 500 chance, and it's not even that, because
there's plenty of people who do all the time, though.
Yes, but clearly there's far more who would be unable to do that because of the conditions they have. It's frankly beyond naive to
professional baseball players. There are people who spend their entire lives in AA and AAA baseball, working for about $35,000 a year as professional baseballers. Okay, they never get called up to the majors. They never make that big money. There are hundreds of, probably even thousands of people in the farm programs in professional baseball. These are people who are passionate about baseball, and that's what they do for a living. College football players, American football players, thousands of football players every year sign up to be drafted, and there's only I think 230 that'll get picked up, and then out of those, only about 150 of them will be signed or so. I don't know the exact numbers, but I mean, it just dwindles. Okay, that's where competition comes in. You have to be better than those to the left and the right of you in order to succeed in certain fields. In order to succeed, you have to be better than mediocre.
But no one's saying that American football, for instance, should just become like anyone gets in and like, everyone gets a chance to be in the draft. Like, of course not. What we're saying is that shouldn't lessen your quality of life. You shouldn't be denied. You shouldn't be unable to access food, healthcare, housing as we see today.
But if you're not producing the same quality of a product, your product is lesser. Yes,
it's dependent on
stuff is valued less.
That's ridiculous.
Like, it is.
It isn't. Can you see though that that's dependent on the free market? Like, what would you say is more important? Being a doctor or scoring the winning touchdown at the Super Bowl? I
honestly would say a doctor's more important.
Of course, but the free market clearly says otherwise because the Super Bowl makes more money. So,
well, that's because entertainment is such a select field that there's even less of a chance of becoming an entertainer than it would to become a doctor.
There's demonstratively that healthcare is more crucial to most people's life than the Super Bowl. But the Super Bowl is given exactly. But then capitalism has just bypassed that by giving the Super Bowl was worth what, billions, and doctors do not like earn billions. We can look at another one. Transportation of food. Without the transportation of food, you lose like pretty much the way society functions. You have like problem. You have to go back to like a rural society where people just have like little disconnected fields and stuff, and it's pretty poor. But they're not even worthy of minimum wage, it seems. And in many cases, corporations use this outfield where they can pay even not even minimum wage and essentially nothing. Teachers is another one. Teachers are responsible for the education everyone has. Yet, lots of teachers have to. In Oklahoma the other day, in fact, teachers had to miss the 5th day of the week to work second jobs to afford paying their rent.
Like, I happen to live in Oklahoma, and that is actually a problem.
Exactly, but that's a problem. Why does that happen? Can you see?
Well, the reason why it's happening in Oklahoma is because the leaders of the state of Oklahoma's government put all their eggs into the oil basket, and then when the oil prices dropped, they didn't have the revenue that they once had.
So they took a risk in capitalism.
They took a risk, and it shot them in the ass. Honestly,
and it affected the entire state.
Yes, and it was a dumb thing. They should have learned from the first crash in the 70s not to put all your eggs in one basket. Hell, even Wu-Tang Clan said even the Wu-Tang Clan said you need to diversify your bonds inward. Okay? Let's just be honest. If you sit there and you put all your hopes and dreams into one basket, you are exponentially increasing the chances of it blowing up in your face.
We've already established, but you think that's okay because you were saying earlier about how you have to take risks, and even if the odds are ridiculous,
I believe in the individual taking the risk, not the masses taking, or not the masses being forced into a risk by their newly elected people. No, that is not capitalism. That's exactly capitalism. Representation government gone awry.
Why did they make the risk in the first place? Because they wanted to make more profits. They wanted to increase their capital.
They thought they would, and they weren't paying attention to the markets when every economist in the world was going, oil's about to drop out. They didn't adjust. They failed to adapt and overcome to the ever-changing markets.
They took a risk under capitalism, and it reflected in a negative condition for the rest of them. But as we've already said, you said people controlled by the masses. What do you think controls the world today? Like, the corporations have the influence and power over society to create the conditions that result in teachers being unable to survive based on their teachers' wages. So they have to go and work another job. Like, we can see every element of society is negatively affected by capitalism, by this system, which is forcing people into curtailing their own lives and their own skills and enjoyments to adhere to the free market. And we can, those teachers had to do that because of what the state did. But the state is adhering to capitalism itself.
The teachers aren't working on they're only working 4 days a week. It's not because they have to get a second job. It's because the individual school districts do not have enough money to keep their lights on more than 4 days a week, which I think is deplorable. It's terrible.
But why is that?
Because the government made poor choices.
And why did they make them?
because they thought that they could ride the oil train all the way to the bank.
Yeah, and exactly. So
They
they
made a
thought they
poor
were going to.
decision. But
They
as
took a
a
risk
government,
under capitalism.
the government's job is not to speculate and make investments. The government's job is actually to provide basic services to the populace. That is it. They are not there, and they made some poor choices. I mean, one of the largest aircraft depots in the nation is in Oklahoma City. It's where they rebuild airplanes. They perform modifications and stuff to make sure these planes are airworthy over a long period of time, deep inspections. And instead of taxing that place that brings in tons of money and is the single largest employer in the state of Oklahoma, they decided to gamble on the oil. The representatives should have to pay for that. They should lose their jobs for this. But I'm not a resident of this state. This state is filled with a bunch of idiots who sit there and go, well, it worked good before thing, and it's just kind of dumb. You know, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. The state of Oklahoma is guilty of insanity. But you are right. The teachers are not getting paid enough. I do agree with that.
Exactly. But if we go to the root cause of this, it's through, capitalism itself. Like you said, they took a risk, and yeah, it was silly to put their money into oil. That's not going to work. But the reason they took it isn't because they thought, oh yeah, let's just do this and roll some dice. It's because of the idea. They thought they were going to make more money. We were saying earlier, you were saying that people should take the 1 in 500 chance and be willing to take that risk. That's what capitalism is. The government, the administrative facilities of the state, decided they were going to take that risk and try and further their profits, and it didn't work. But the result of that is, the teachers being unable to work a full week. The schools not even having the power to keep their lights on. It's disgraceful, like you said, but it's going to happen because we value profits over people. If we wanted to, there's no reason any school would ever be in that situation. Every teacher could be, given, and anyone, in fact,
government is actually supposed to be a zero-sum game. They're not actually supposed to gain any profit by.
There's a lot of things that shouldn't happen, but
that's government. The difference between commercial industry and government is the fact that government's supposed to be completely non-profit.
Yes, but that's not going to happen under capitalism, is it? Because the government still, has to adhere to the economy.
Well, no, because if you look at the TVA system here in America, the Tennessee Valley Authority is a government-run energy producer, mostly known for nuclear, but some coal and some hydroelectric plants. They run on a zero profit program. The same thing with the post office. Now, the problem that you see with these programs is the federal government actually looks at these programs, and when they see that, they're starting to make a profit, they start siphoning what profits it may make off and put it into other deals to hide the fact that they're making a profit, and then it gets carried away, and then these programs start losing money. And honestly, what should happen is when these government programs start making a profit is they should start scaling back their operating cost or whatever for the consumer to purchase their services, pass that savings on, because they're not supposed to make a profit. Now, this doesn't always happen, and that's because, well, people are corrupt. It doesn't matter what system you have. People are going to be corrupt. People are going to do stupid shit. People are going to try to game the system. It's what happens in every system ever.
But, can you see how saying that is sort of a bit of a excuse, really, for the sort of state of government and corruption under capitalism? Under capitalism, where the prime incentive and the prime focus is to make profit with your commodities, you're always going to see profit be the prime incentive. So a government that says, no, we're going to be just and moral is always going to eventually be, bought out or replaced by one that adheres to the free market more. So, for instance, you look at the state of America, with its corruption and its poor education system and the healthcare, and it could very easily address all these things. But that's suddenly going to hit profits because wealth would be not as concentrated by the financial elite. So, that's not going to happen. And a person who runs on that platform isn't probably going to get elected because, it turns out that to win an election, you need to be quite wealthy in itself. Like, that's another area capitalism really fails, is the democratic process where, it's very easy to get in if you have more money than the opponent. You can spend more on advertising, on marketing, on campaigning. It's very much a money game, as is anything, because of capitalism. And we have to remove ourselves from the idea that humans are inherently have this capitalist mind and aiming to naturally fallible to corruption, because they're always going to serve the interest of money under capitalism, where they act to increase their profits. You said yourself earlier, your friends or colleagues or whatever who was in that band, like they sought to allow themselves to be directed by the corporation because they want more money, and that's not because they're like corrupted or inherently bad. That's because they're naturally acting under capitalism. The risk scenario we're talking about earlier, the 1 in 500 chance of making it as a musician, people aren't going to take that because it's more likely that you're going to lose your capital. You're going to be in a worse position. Like, it's obvious that's going to happen if you just trot on a bus, which you probably can't even afford because you're paying for your food and rent and stuff. That's a risk that's just not going to go anywhere. And I think it's important to also highlight, like, rather than just focusing in on tiny little elements, we need to focus on the whole picture that workers have their have conditions of society, their labour contributes to society, and the capitalist class profit off it, despite not contributing to that labour, despite not doing their labour. We need to link it all together and realize that fundamentally capitalism is unfair. It's taking the labor of others and profiting off it, when indeed everyone's labor is valuable, and every human life should be entitled to the means to keep themselves alive. A human life is worth something inherently, and regardless of how much profit it makes, regardless of how much it contributes to society, just by existing, that contribution in itself is enough to have worth and have value.
I disagree. There are people who contribute nothing to society.
Why?
They're nothing more than leeches. Breathing alone does not make you worth anything. Existing.
Why shouldn't the value of human life itself be considered a valuable thing? I think it's every single person, regardless of how much or how little they do, is valuable in themselves. And no, we're not saying every single person needs to be put on a pedestal.
What I'm saying is there are people who are able-bodied who choose to not work, who have the opportunities and still negate to take them. And I've asked you this question, and it's been skirted several times. How would you deal with social loafing?
Well, I wouldn't say skirted, because I sort of.
Well, okay, you've redirected, you've moved around, but here's the hard question.
It's not a hard question.
What would you say would be the important thing? How would you motivate people to work if everyone got the exact same thing?
The thing is, though, everyone's not getting the exact same thing. The thing we change, is profit itself. The profit idea. You can't profit off someone else without profiting off their labor, exploiting their labor by taking what they did.
So, should a doctor be held liable for malpractice?
If you let me finish, I'm going to draw back to what you were saying a second ago. Thus, the idea that a doctor is worth more than a garbage man disposer is wrong, because the increase in wage you're giving that doctor is derived from the labor of others. Similarly, the labor of the garbage person is unable to exist without the labor of those who built the garbage truck, who built the bin bags, who trained the garbage man. Every bit of labor is connected. But to come back to the idea of leeches and laziness, it comes from a very right-wing capitalist idea about workers. They want you to maintain the ideas of the system that you need to be working to be a good person. You need to be making profit on the free market. So someone who doesn't want to work is then negatively framed as quote unquote lazy or bad, by calling them a leech or something, or
even in tribal societies throughout history, well documented that people who just outright refuse to work for any reason, they get left out in the cold.
The thing is,
So
though,
if now when they become elders in the tribe or whatnot, and they are unable to perform, then the younger generations tend to take care of those people. That's where we get the human tradition of respecting the elders and stuff. It's like, hey, they put in the work, they helped raise us, stuff like that. That's quite understandable. What I'm talking about is when you look at the people in their mid-20s who are healthy, who are able-bodied, and they are just worthless. I mean, they refuse to get a job. They think they're better than what they're actually worth. I'm sorry. No, everyone is not worth something. There are people who are just worthless. They contribute nothing. All they do is take up air and expel CO2.
Right.
So
okay.
if
Two
you don't
things.
contribute, how is that handled?
A few things. Firstly, tribal societies were a little bit different to today, to now, in that physical human labor was literally everything was produced by human labor. Everyone needed to contribute because of that. Whereas today, we have machines, we have electricity, we can do the job of thousands of workers with one machine. We don't need everyone to be physically contributing directly to society, and we can instead recognize the human the human element of humanity and enjoy ourselves as human beings. Secondly, if you want to talk about a real sort of group of people that doesn't do anything and contributes and essentially lives off the land and lives off the labor of other people, you merely have to look at the wealthy, the shareholders, the CEOs, the people who are on the top of society, taking the labor of everyone else beneath them and living a life of billions, despite that life being essentially provided for them by the workers.
So an executive at a company, at a multi-million-dollar company, and we'll just look at executives first, because shareholders are a totally different pile.
But when you look at them in a second, so I can finish what I was saying about
okay.
I think the last thing you said about 20-year-old like people in the 20s, being worthless, being a better right, is just a bit of lazy stereotyping, really. I mean, I think to again, worth in a capitalist world is determined by a free market. I mean, we've already established, but based on the idea of how much you contribute being your worth, someone like sort of a reality TV star is in this idea worth more than teachers and doctors and people who actively make the world a better place and stuff. Like, and you've already said that you think it's deplorable that teachers and school systems are in this situation. Yeah, that's what a free market does. Like, is that teacher worthless because they can't compete on the free market? Is that person who can't find a job because there simply aren't enough, because it turns out that the automation is more profitable than just paying people to do jobs you could easily do with a machine? Are those workers worthless even though they're willing to contribute? The idea of framing society as being you're bad and lazy and deserve to starve if you're not working is practically like illogical, and also really dehumanizing of the lived experience of humans. People deserve and are entitled to a healthy life, and we have means to easily do this. We have machines to make labor much easier. And to draw back to what you were saying, the incentive to work. Well, we don't need people in a field plowing crops all day because we have machines that can do that. And if we distribute our wealth and materials easily and amongst everyone, we can make it so that we don't need all this labor in fields and stuff and in factories when we can have machines to do that. And people don't need to have.
But you can't have machines to do everything.
Well, eventually you can have machines doing pretty much all physical labor.
But okay, so let me ask you this: how do you determine who works and who don't?
Sorry?
How do you determine who works and who don't?
How do I determine who works?
Because if I can live the same lifestyle as someone who sits on a couch and watches Oprah all day, and not work, where is my incentive to work? Why wouldn't I sit on my dead ass?
Well, the thing is, though, you can do as you wish because you're free. You no longer have to sell your labor on the free market.
Yes. So if I don't have to sell my labor to live at all, but I provide a service that is not yet taken over, not yet automated, what is my motivation to work?
Well, no, there is not.
There
You don't
has to
have
be incentive. People don't do stuff just to do it. I love working on airplanes. I consider it a hobby, but I will gladly give it up the moment they say, hey, you're not going to make anything extra for it. I'm not going to put that kind of liability on myself. My job is actually quite stressful because if I make a mistake, planes fall out of the sky, kill the people inside of them, and possibly the people it lands on.
Yes, which is why your job is going to be automated. Since that the second the computer can do your job better than you can, you're not going to be needed for because why would they have someone who is more likely to make a mistake? But can you not see that it's better to be aiming for a society where we don't base ourselves on the free market? Like, for instance, your idea of incentives. People, if you took away the idea that you have to sell your labor to survive, you'll see people doing things for the enjoyment of it. Like, for instance, making a video game because they want to, not just because it's something that's going to make them money. People in the field of medicine because they want to actively study and develop themselves in the knowledge around the medical world because they enjoy it, not just because it's a high-paying profession. People teaching because they want to be around kids and helping raise that next generation of people in the world, not just because it's the first thing they can think of to do with their degree. Like, we have people in fields where they can actively help and do things that they want to do that will not only benefit society but also benefit themselves. And we have 7 billion people on the planet. We have enough people to find groups of people who want to do certain things. People like just doing things sometimes, and you'd be surprised what people would do if they had the time and didn't have the pressures of the capitalist system honing down on them. Like, imagine what you could do if you didn't have to sell your labor to survive, and someone wasn't saying you will pay for your land, your commodities, your food to put a roof over your. I don't know if you have kids or not, but to put a roof over them and stuff.
I'm just saying, if there's no incentive,
but no, under capitalism,
under capitalism, there is definitely incentive.
No, it's not incentive.
You're going to work or you're going to starve.
That's not incentive. That's force. There's no choice there. You're not being it's not like
no. You have a choice. You do have a choice.
Well, the choice between work
or starve. It's not a good choice.
Exactly. So it's not a choice at all.
But it's a choice.
No one's going to choose starve, are they?
Actually, there's a lot of people who do. They decide to live on social welfare and stuff like that.
But that's not. That's not.
They make that choice. There are people. I know people who have actually said, you know what? If we have another child, we can get more money, and we wouldn't have to get any more than work 15 hours a week. There are people in the world that do that. There's people that try to game the system. So under a socialist model, please just answer.
I just have answered.
What do you do with those who decide to do nothing?
They exist. There's nothing wrong with doing nothing, and you'd be surprised what people would do if the constraints of capitalism were lifted from them. Like, the reason people, accept the welfare system and accept the benefits they receive. I mean, I don't know what sort of planet you're living on if you're thinking people are just saying, "Oh yeah, let's get an extra kid and have some more money that way." Like, that's not how humans are. People, you don't necessarily starve and stuff. But firstly, that's not even the case, because in the UK, certainly benefits in many cases are unlivable. Like, below, not enough to have warm houses, not enough to pay rent, having to skip meals to afford basic things like soap and stuff. It's a gross system. It's a system you don't want to be on because it's deeply inhumane. You got to also consider the terrible state it is for disabled people and for mentally ill people and for people who aren't as able-bodied and subsequently are viewed as worthless by the state. A deeply ableist idea, but one that capitalism happily goes with because it's about free market, and they don't want to be bothering with anything but
the
profit.
Guy who I buy my juices from, he's permanently disabled. He suffers from congenital heart failure. Great guy. I'm actually going to have him on my show here in about a week or so, kind of spamming his products and stuff, trying to get people to buy from him. He lives on disability, and it's not an easy life. It is of no fault of his own that he actually has congenital heart failure. It's actually a genetic deficiency. I have no problem with helping helping the disabled. Where I really have the problem is those who are able-bodied, those who are able to get out and work and learn, refusing to do so. I have no problem with picking up a little slack for those who can't help themselves. I mean, I have spent my entire life defending others who cannot defend themselves. That's kind of the job of the military. I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, but that's actually the truth. Those who can do, those who can't, well, they usually don't, or they fail miserably. But in all honesty, the reason why I joined the military was because I was picked on as a kid. I learned how to fight, and I became a fighter, and I was happy to do it because I was once that person that could not defend himself. But the deal is, had there not been incentives for it, I wouldn't have done it. Because I do look out for number one. I look out for my family. I try to look out for other people as much as I can. But in the end, all you have is taking care of yourself and your family. Because honestly, Owen, you seem like a pleasant person. But you wouldn't give two shits about me if you saw me on the side of the road and didn't know who the hell I was. That's just the way people are. We're kind of tribalistic. We're kind of to our deal.
The thing is, though, in the world, we've got to, like you said, we've got to look out for ourselves. But that's because of capitalism. That's because if we have to make what we can with what we have. Like, our money isn't something that we can just get easily. So whilst ideally we'd love to help people, we'd love to see how people are doing, but the time we spend doing that and the money we may give to like a homeless person is stuff we're not helping for ourselves. And like you said, like your own family is naturally going to come first before the the person you see on the street wandering around without a home or anything. But that's a condition of capitalism. There's no reason for that person to be homeless because we have enough homes, we have enough land, we have enough food. But because of the way society is distributed, because of the theft of wealth that the upper class do, the seizing of profits through the labor, that's how we end up with this situation. Why people have to look out for themselves, because if you stop thinking about what's going on in your own life for even a small period of time, you could be very well on the streets in that situation. That's why it's not like people are inherently inherently selfish. Like, people have to look out for themselves, otherwise they're really going to suffer. And you touched on the military there, and like you said, I'm glad you think I'm all right, and it's been nice talking, and it's been nice and civil and stuff. But I think we really need to analyze the American military and what it actually does around the world, and how it furthers and shows the disgusting elements of capitalism. And it was sort of just American foreign policy, really, and just the sort of disgraceful actions of America around the world in the name of capitalism. So if you want to,
one moment, I'm trying to keep up with the chat, because I mean the chat isn't moving too fast, but I'm divided my attention. I apologize.
No, not at all. Shall I speak for a bit about my thoughts on the military then, or?
I just don't see capitalism as the big boogeyman that you're making it out to be.
Well, it's not
I look at it like this. Okay, throughout history, well before capitalism was ever established, well before colonialism was established, during imperialism, during all sorts of different models, economic models, the exact same things have always come up. The exact same problems. Homelessness is nothing new. People not being able to afford things is nothing new.
Of course not, but there's still
Karl Marx came up with this grand utopian idea.
But that
was a thought exercise.
He didn't come up with the idea
in his own works, that it was just a thought exercise, and realized that due to the corruption of man could not be carried out.
No,
Marx has been tried on multiple times.
Marx didn't say that, and for one, only that Karl Marx he didn't create like the idea of
no, he just wrote. He just put it all down on paper.
No, he critiqued capitalism. He wrote about the workings of capitalism and how it stole the produce of society for the ruling class. he spoke about how feudalism developed into capitalism and how eventually capitalism would naturally decline itself because you can't sustain growth forever. You can't grow forever infinitely on a planet with finite resources, with enough like people and stuff. But to come back to what I was about to start speaking about, the US American actions abroad and in the name of capitalism. We don't. You said, "Oh, it's not this big boogeyman," and I don't think people who are anti-capitalist see it as that either. We're not saying, "Oh, it's the big bad, the evil witch, the the stereotypical villain of like these grand epics." It's a very real system. It's what happens when you have power systems and people want to preserve their power systems. So they create a system where the working class has to work to survive, whilst at the same time, having to create profits and wealth for the ruling class. So a system where the means of production are owned privately, so food, land, water is all controlled by a ruling class, and for workers to access it, they have to sell their labor. And so, it's a system that forces and exploits the workers into operating. And yeah, you can dress it up nicely and say, oh, it's all about freedom, you've got a choice and you've got all these options. But ultimately, because of the way society is tiered, ultimately it's all dependent on what makes profits for the ruling class, which is why, for instance, teachers, despite very important to the society, are facing such hardships in your state, which is why doctors aren't paid as much as footballers in the Super Bowl, because one makes more money than the other. It's all about a free market, and there's no moral or ethical constraints to it. It's just about what makes more profit. But coming back to the US military, because I think this is a really important area to talk about when it comes to capitalism, you have to look at the way America and other nations, to be fair as well, has used militant force and the power of capitalism to quash and crush and ruin parts of the world, both environmentally and politically. So, for instance, we can look at regions of Latin America like Chile, countries like Chile and El Salvador and Guatemala, where the people there have wanted change. They've wanted land to be owned by socially, and they've wanted actual reforms to society. And then America's said, well, no, that's going to affect our profits, and either backed a coup or outright invaded or sabotaged that country, placed not regulations, placed embargoes on them and stuff, done anything they can to make that nation fail. So, for instance, in Chile, where they overthrew a democratic government to install this a fascist Augusto Pinochet, who was obviously a capitalist who deregulated Chile, made it a free market nation, allowed US corporations to buy up land and own the means of production, and thus deliver profits for America. And the same in El Salvador and Guatemala. And you can look at their, the terrible human rights abuses across the globe. Like Middle East is another one where they regularly overthrow and destabilize regions in the name of seizing control of oil and thus making more money for themselves. And that is capitalism in action, doing what you can to maximize your capital, to accrue more, make more profits, have more commodities in your possession, and thus act in a way that gives you more power. And this isn't to say, oh yeah, Americans are evil and stuff. This is to say that the American state does not care for the clear moral ambiguity and awfulness of their actions, because they are making profit. They're adhering to the system that has been placed in front of them. And you have to look at capitalism and say, well, no, this is what's going to happen when you give people this system. You're going to see atrocities in the name of profit. I don't really think there's a defense for the actions of American military actions abroad. So I don't know how you're going to respond to that, but take it away.
Have you been there?
Been where?
Have you been to the Middle East? Have you been to the Sudan? Have you been to the Congo?
I have not been.
Okay,
to them.
Then you really don't know. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm just going to be quite blunt. Until you've been there and actually seen what goes on there with your own eyes, you can't fathom the idea. What is reported through the BBC, through all the news agencies, honestly, is scrubbed rubbish. There's some terrible things going on over there, and yeah, I've seen some pretty bad stuff, and A lot of those people deserve to die, and I was very happy to help them meet their maker.
Deserve to die?
Yes, because they're terrible people who will enslave others, who will rape children for nothing more than to gain power over their parents. There's some bad people in this world, and I am gladly willing to be the arbiter that'll bring them to their maker, their deity, or whatever it is that they believe they came from.
Could someone not say the same of Americans? Like, can you not?
There's horrible people in America as well.
But no, but you see, this rhetoric is pretty dangerous because it's coming from your perspective, and someone could very easily apply that to America, which happened. That's just the exact. This is the exact rhetoric that groups like Al Qaeda and the Taliban and stuff. They want.
You're right, and you know what? Sing it, don't bring it. No, I look at it like this. I'm a very pro-gun, pro-American type person. I'm not a nationalist, but I do think America freaking A number one. I will tell you this, that I believe that the Western culture is the best culture. And I'm unapologetic about it.
But can you see though that you're saying oh well there's bad people there and we have to go and act there, but like you said, there's bad people everywhere. But what drives America to go and destabilize an entire region in the Middle East? Because
we want to exploit their resources. I mean,
exactly. Can you not see that?
I make no bones about it. No,
exactly. But that's bad. That's not a good action at all.
Why is it? Why is that bad?
What, taking? That's exactly like.
No, okay. Let me break this down to you. If it wasn't for the West, if it wasn't for Western society actually teaching some of these people who are still stuck 1,400 years behind the rest of the world how to drill oil, they wouldn't even exist.
But that's not even true though, because
we taught them how to drill oil. We taught them the West did all that. But understand that every technological advancement that has happened throughout the world, minus the invention of gunpowder, has pretty much come from the West.
But that's not even true, because societies in Africa and in the Middle East were well ahead of Europe for centuries before.
And then Islam took over, and they got stuck in the 1200s.
That's not even true either, because Muslims, for instance, the Arabic world, in fact, is where we get a lot of our numerical systems from. There's more to it than just.
You're right. And where what happened? What happened? What actually held them back was during the Mongol invasion, when Kublai Khan's cousin sacked Baghdad, which was the intellectual center of the world at the time. He took the entire library of Baghdad and stuck it in the Euphrates River, to where the river once ran red with the blood of the people they killed, eventually started turning blue from the ink. And that is when Europe actually started to become into the Renaissance period. And this is where you see the Enlightenment period in Europe. And that's when, Europe became more of the thought center of the world. Well, the Middle East stagnated.
That's not even true, though, because there were plenty of other...
Because of that. They continuously in the Middle East are trying to get back to the golden age of Islam, which was prior to the Mongol attack, the Mongol occupation of the Middle East. Okay, yes, you're right. The numbers we use are Aramaic in origin. Algebra was actually created in the Middle East, and so was many medicines. But what have they done since?
You're ignoring hold on a second.
I'm talking about in the past 100 years. Where has every technological advance came from? It's came from the West. It's came from free thinking people.
You're ignoring
these kind of
right. Hold on a second. Right, you're ignoring the processes that have made the West the wealth, abundant area that it is, like colonialism, the forced control of Western powers over the rest of the world. So whilst the Renaissance is going on, the wealth that's making the scientific advancements possible is coming from plundering Latin America, like the conquistadors through Mexico and the Caribbean islands and stuff. The slave trade, which made Britain and France and Spain and all the other nations massively wealthy and stuff. Like the idea that you can just sit here and say, oh, there are 100 years of your 100 years period has been, West only. It's come from, pillaging and literally destroying the cultures of the rest of the world. Look at you talk about the Muslims, or whoever it was you were talking about, destroyed that library. What do you think Western powers have been doing in Africa, literally for centuries, even sort of today? Really, I mean, you look at the actions been taken in Libya and how they sort of just tried to raise the nation basically to the ground. Entire cultures destroyed to impose Western standards, which they've for all you want to talk about advancements, a lot of backwards ideas came from the West as well. Like you look at Christianity or evangelical Christianity, and how they've had the impact on Africa, where a lot of their pretty negative views about sex and about sexuality and gender and stuff. That stuff has been enforced on other cultures by the West, and local cultures and local ideas about this stuff has been stamped out.
That's actually the history of man. It's not just Christianity.
No, but that was one thing I said.
When Islam takes over any place, they do the exact same thing.
But, hold on a second. No, I'm not saying that it's unique to Christianity, but as the West is what we're talking about here, Western colonialism and imperialism stamped out cultures, regardless of what happens, to raise their own bubbles and profit makers for themselves, regardless of things. So to say, oh yeah, the West is the best, ignores how they become the top of the power order, which is through slave trades and through genocide and through mass atrocities. So to bring us to today, and to what we actually started off this little thread, when America ravages Middle Eastern countries and seizes their oil, to say, oh yeah, well we taught them how to drill, is so backwards in thinking, and so horrific a thing to say. It's insulting to say, oh well, just because we put your oil drills in when we have control of your region and we take the resources for ourselves, and your people don't get anything back really, because we're taking the majority of the resource for ourselves and profiting off it and stuff, is incredibly insulting. Additionally, you only have to look at some of the stuff, to talk about, oh yeah, there's bad people in the Middle East. Look at what Americans and British people have done over there in the process of war. Look at Abu Ghraib, this horrific photos of that. It's true. Horrific. I don't see really why you're laughing.
Because Abu Ghraib was fucking hilarious.
How was it hilarious?
I'm sorry if hurting some Muzzies' feelings because they wouldn't answer some questions and humiliating them to get their way. I'm sorry. They do much worse. They do much worse.
That's ridiculous. How can you defend what happened in Abu Ghraib?
Because I don't give a fuck about them. That's honestly.
They're war crimes. Torture.
I'm sorry. Oh no. I made them walk around in their tidy whities and I embarrassed them. Piss off.
That was a bit. It was
when
a bit.
When they gang rape American POWs and stuff like that for nothing more than sports.
So everyone there is a member of Al Qaeda all of a sudden.
If they were in that prison, they weren't there for jaywalking. Trust me.
So you're relying on the American justice system basically to determine where they are. Look, what about Guantanamo Bay, where still maybe not quite as bad as Abu Ghraib, but still pretty horrific stuff happens, like solitary confinement and war crimes.
I'm all for waterboarding. You will not see a sympathetic tear shed for those people one bit.
That's ridiculous, though. Can you not see how horrific this is? Perhaps maybe going down this approach, of the West doing stuff, is not the best one, because this is disgraceful. How can you sit there and say that Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo is justified, and all these horrid torture tactics and stuff are justified to people who essentially? Sorry.
Well, honestly, what happened in Abu Ghraib was not torture. It caused no permanent physical damage to them. All it did was cause a little bit of mental anguish. Honestly, I have no problem with doing nothing but piping screaming babies across an intercom 24/7 and not allowing people to sleep in order to get information. That isn't torture. Sure, it may be a little upsetting. It's a bit unpleasant.
That is torture.
But it isn't torture. No, torture is actual physical. It has to cause long-lasting physical pain.
Mental as well. You can yes, psychology is an actual field of study and stuff, and you can clearly
it is a field of study.
Yeah, and there's clearly mental effects people can have. Because how can you sit there and say that
because under the Geneva Convention?
No, I'm pretty sure Abu Ghraib, the people there were found guilty of war crimes and of
They were found guilty of war crimes, but not for violation of torture laws.
well, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure
They were found guilty. They were found guilty of violating cultural standards.
it's still torture to do what they did there, to parade them around, force them to masturbate, create human piles of naked bodies and stuff with them, like set like dogs on them and stuff whilst they're in the nude and stuff. Like I can't believe I'm sitting here and telling you like Abu Ghraib was a clear aberration of like justice, and the fact that America even went there to imprisoning people for essentially just being Muslim in the Middle East.
No, that isn't why they were in Abu Ghraib.
No, well, yeah,
People who were in Abu Ghraib were actual people who were members of terrorist organizations who were actually captured, caught doing actions of terrorists. I mean, if you want to defend terrorism, hey man, go for it. Feel free. Really just understand that in today's normal society, your PM might actually have you bombed for it. I know that the U.S. has bombed U.S. citizens with drone strikes for saying close to about what you've said.
I mean,
look at Anwar al-Awlaki. Honestly, we completely violated his constitutional rights. We didn't give him a trial. I don't believe that the U.S. is saying sin by any means.
But, I mean,
all at the same time, Abu Ghraib, that wasn't nothing. It truly wasn't.
How can you sit there and say that when the clear?
Because I remember a couple of privates who were gang raped by some of the actual people who were in Abu Ghraib. One of the ladies came back with all of her limbs shattered, and she was gang raped and lucky to have survived. So no,
so that justifies torturing everyone in Abu Ghraib and everyone who you capture.
Those people that were tortured, hell's yeah. Honestly, they could have flayed him, and I would not have cared.
Sorry?
They could have flayed him, and I would not have cared.
Well, I think it's quite clear that your moral compass is a bit like broken. If it's all right, just like two wrongs don't make a right. Like,
no, but three rights make a left.
Well,
I really, seriously, there
is
a
point. See that this is is pretty horrific to say, oh well. Like, because this bad experience happened to one of my colleagues, it's now justified to torture anyone who happens to end up in one of our prisons because, they're bad.
I don't think that you should torture anyone who happens to be in our prisons, but if you happen to be in Guantanamo Bay, you're a little bit bigger than, you did something a little bad.
Only that's not even true, because there's people who have had no trial. There's no, like, clear...
They don't deserve a trial. You
just get
they're an illegal combatant.
That you just get to say they're guilty, and then they're just like, that's that. You're just off to Guantanamo Bay. Are you like serious? Can you listen to what you're saying? Like what?
Yes. I volunteered to go to Gitmo. I don't really care.
That's ridiculous, though. Like, how can you say that when there's no trial? You've said they're guilty, so off you go. Can you not?
Because they're not caught. They're not caught in the U.S. They don't have those rights.
That's ridiculous, though.
No, it isn't. You don't understand. If you don't understand how the law of combat works, yeah, they aren't even given combatant status because they aren't part of a uniformed military. They are considered nothing more than terrorists. They are a non-state person.
Not even the case.
They do not exist
all the time. It's people. They just like we got intel, so off you go. No trial, no fairness to it at all. Can you not hear yourself?
Don't get caught messing with people who are that.
Don't be brown skinned, basically. Don't look the part.
Don't be dealing with Al Qaeda or ISIS. Are you really defending these people?
That's not what's being said at all. Like, listen to yourself. You sound like pretty it's pretty abhorrent from the stuff you've said. Like, oh, it's okay to torture people. It's okay to.
Depends on what your definition of torture is.
Well, torture.
Waterboarding is not torture.
It's not torture.
Have you been waterboarded?
No.
You have a clue. Okay. I've been trained.
I'm pretty sure I know that waterboarding is like a form of torture.
Do you?
Yes.
No, it's something that you really would not understand completely unless you've experienced it. It is unpleasant.
Yeah, because it's torture.
No, it isn't. It creates no lasting physical damage.
Yeah, but emotional
They make
damage
you
and mental
hydrophobic.
damage.
Oh, emotional damage. Come on. People get emotionally damaged by hearing loud noises these days. The definition of emotional damage has really moved. The goalpost is not steady.
Well,
So
look,
no, I don't buy
it doesn't-
into the whole emotional damage thing because I know people who claim to have PTSD because they got bad test grades.
It's not quite as
What
simple as that,
PTSD
and
is.
frankly,
PTSD, having bombs falling around you and stuff like that. Yeah, that's going to make you a little nervous. Being shot at may cause PTSD. Having a bad day. Oh no, someone strapped me down and poured water on my face. Made me feel like I was drowning, even though I could completely breathe the entire time. It's not torture. It's
yes, it
just
is.
highly
Are
uncomfortable.
you serious? This is ridiculous.
Yes. No, it
Also,
isn't.
look, if you can't even see that these actions of, like, you know, the American military have clear elements of torture and clear.
There are some things that
atrocious-
the American military has done that is bad. That is
Yeah, which you've
completely
just
wrong.
defended now.
Yeah, but you're defending terrorists, so I guess we're
But
even.
how have I defended terrorists?
Oh, because you're like, oh well,
And
these
also,
people who are over at Gitmo are all innocent. They've been
well,
given.
I didn't
They
say
don't
they're
deserve a
all
trial. They're not even legally required to have a trial, and that is by
Everyone-
international law.
innocent until proven guilty. You can't just
No. That is not something that exists worldwide, and you know that. Hell,
Yeah,
even in your own country, innocent until proven guilty isn't a thing.
Yeah, and that's wrong as well. I'm not going to sit here and defend the UK.
Innocent
The UK 's
until
a pretty
proven guilty
broken-
is only an American value. Let's be honest. Under the imperial government under which you live, it is guilty until proven otherwise. Let's be
pretty sure
honest.
that's not. That's guilty until proven otherwise.
Yes. If the crown decides to charge you with something, you are guilty until proven otherwise.
What? No, what you mean? Once you've been through the court and been
No,
proven guilty.
once the crown charges you. Because guarantee you, the crown can still charge you with things.
Well, yeah, obviously, but you know,
Okay.
that's not. You still. It's not like
There
the
is no
Queen
innocent
or-
until proven guilty in the
Yes,
UK.
there is. Oh my god! Like you can't. Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say our justice system is perfect, but there still is. You still have to be put on a trial. Like you still have to be like go through this. And the point is, you can't just seize people, getting like off the street as like off you based on your intel with no proof, no like actual. Oh yeah, this person is guilty, and take them off to Guantanamo Bay. Can you not see how this could be? You know, not only is it like immoral,
There are certain people that I have no problem. I have no problem with making.
What if someone did that to you? What if someone heard this hangout and said, "Oh, this person has some pretty questionable views. Let's get him," and they just seized you and took you off, and you got waterboarded, and they're like, "Oh, well, it's not torture. You've had no lasting damage, and you've been through this horrible experience."
If I survive it, maybe my opinion will change. But I'll tell you this: the people who are stuck in Guantanamo Bay are stuck there under some truly actionable intelligence. They are not good people. They're not even remotely good people, and they deserve everything bad that happens to them. And I don't really care. There are just some people that do not deserve that second chance at life.
Based on what?
Based on their actions.
What? But what? Who makes you the arbiter of what their actions were, and also like what their actions, which aren't even specified because you know they don't have their trial, so there's no way to prove you know what actually happened because you know you've already said they bypassed that, which you know is clearly
because they're not required to have those.
That's clearly
that's
not.
Why they're not allowed to touch a U.S. That's the reason they're not allowed to touch U.S. soil because if they do, then they have to be given a trial.
Exactly. So can you see that as America using, you know, its power to do what it likes and treat people as awfully as they, you know, can.
But in order to qualify for some place like Gitmo, you have to have plenty of evidence. It's not like, oh, this person's brown, send them. No, there's white people there too. There's black people there.
Sure,
but you know, it doesn't matter what color. If you're a piece of shit, you go there. If you're a piece of shit,
that's not the case, though, is it? Because you know you've happily like said that people don't have trials.
Yes, but if you're someone like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, no, you deserve to exist in a nothing state such as Guantanamo Bay, which has no affiliation to any country.
No, you can't just evaluate the order and say, "Oh yeah, it's okay to just seize people and torture them." Like again, because you could do that very well with some of the stuff you've said just now. Someone could say, "Oh, this is a pretty like horrific thing you've just said," and what is that okay? You wouldn't say, "Oh, well, you know, what about my trial? What about my rights to you know, be
I'm on U.S. soil."
Sorry,
I'm on U.S. soil. There's a little difference.
So what?
I'm on U.S. soil. There's a difference.
So what? Only Americans get the
No,
right to
if
this.
you have no, once you're on U.S. soil, you are afforded the
All
constitutional
right,
right.
you
That
go
is
on
the law
holiday.
of the
You go on
land.
holiday. You're on holiday, and it's easy, like they do with some people in situations,
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay. You're not going to complain. It's like, oh yeah, I'm
Oh, I'm going to
guilty.
complain,
Yeah, but
but it's not going to
exactly,
do a whole lot of good.
exactly. So can
And
we not
honestly,
focus on that?
if I'm even heard, I I mean, but honestly,
So you say,
when
oh
I
yeah, just
travel
start a
abroad,
life.
I'm very careful about where I go.
But let's say you're not careful on this instance. Like we're doing a thought experiment here, using your own logic. Like
If I'm trouncing around a non-state like Afghanistan and someone grabs me, you know what? That's a decision that yeah, that's a bad decision going to Afghanistan.
like, this is like, look, I'm honestly like sort of dumbfounded by this idea that you're going to sit here and defend Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib and the actions of the US in the Middle East because, oh yeah, we gave them that stuff in the first place, and ignore the sort of history of
I'm not going
colonialism.
to sit there and honestly, I'm not going to sit there and what happened in Abu Ghraib. Some of it was bad, some of it was justified. But hey, you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't know that. And I'm not going to sit there and tell you why, because I happen to know some of the people who were actually there. The military is not as big as people think it is. I know people who are stationed over in Gitmo. You know, the people that are over there as prisoners actually don't have it too bad. They get fed.
I just they get fed. What, like solitary confinement and like
No,
noise
they don't have
torture and
solitary confinement. In fact, they are allowed I believe like 4 hours a day out in the sun. They can talk to each other. It's not like no. There are some people that do have solitary confinement.
you just said they
But
wasn't any solitary confinement. And now you actually literally just
well,
turned around
no,
that and said,
there's a few. There are a few that do have solitary, but they're not all there under solitary conditions. It depends on the trouble they've given the guards
oh, the
and
trouble,
what they're
like
there for.
complaining about their conditions or like asking to write to
Throwing
their
shit
family.
at them, pissing at
Yeah, but
them, attacking them
you're gonna trust the word of U.S. prison guards over, you know.
over a piece of shit terrorist. Yes,
No, you can't
all
just
day
say,
long.
well, I don't accept them as POS terrorists. That's ridiculous. Like you have no trial. There's just it's the word of mouth basically. It's ridiculous. Like,
Okay.
but like if you can't, I mean, I feel as though the discussion is a little bit futile. Really, if you're going to sit here and say that the actions of the American military are sort of justified because, oh yeah, they were bad, they were terrorists.
There's some bad things America has done. I will not deny that.
But you're still going to sit here and say that, oh, America.
I'm not going to sit there and say that everything they do is bad because I know they're not. You've never served in any military capacity. You've never traveled outside of the EU, I can imagine. I doubt you have really spent too much time out of your own country.
But because
all you know is what you see on BBC, Star News.
Yeah, I don't just follow mainstream news. The internet exists. You can
yes, and whatever blogs you can get in touch with, I'm sure you look at. But the deal is, not everything you see on TV is the truth.
Oh, so I should accept the word of someone who says that Abu Ghraib wasn't all that bad?
No.
Can you not see this? Like,
I'm saying that everyone sees things through different lenses. This is something that you actually talk about quite often. It's about how people see things through different points of view.
Yeah. Perspective.
My point of view, the reason why I have my perspective is because I've been over there and I actually know what some of these people were there for. I have seen their sheets. I've seen the intel. I know what actually has to go through the intel process in order for it to be gathered and determined for it to be vetted to be proper. Now, I can't talk about all that kind of stuff. I've signed something called an NDA. You may have heard of them. But I tend to believe my intelligence agencies well over a YouTube blogger. And I'm not going to ask you to believe everything I say. I don't care. But I'm not going to sit there and shit all over my brothers and sisters in arms because they may do something that you think is questionable when you don't have a snowball's chance in hell of really knowing a quarter of the truth. I'm sorry. It is not arguing semantics. And no, I do not believe that everyone has the inalienable right. I only believe that American citizens have inalienable rights listed under the Constitution.
Why?
Why?
So firstly, can you not see how like backwards that is? Like, what makes someone from another country less deserving of, like, you know?
Because they're not American. If they want to come over to America, come over.
Well, no, but why does the fact they're American make them any, you know, better?
Because that's what this country was founded on.
Like,
I don't believe that U.S. rights should be given to everyone and their cousin. If you want to come here and be part of the American experience, cool, come over here, apply. We'll greet you with open arms, you know. But all the same time, if you want to sit over there in the UK and want to talk about how piss poor America is and never have experienced it, okay, well, you're kind of talking from lack of thereof experience.
Well, yeah, I've not directly lived in America, but, you know, we still have, like, I can see these, you know, states of America just by, like, observing stuff. And you can sit here and tell me, oh yeah, all these lived experiences.
Well, no, okay, look, I've lived in the UK and I enjoyed it, and there are some things that I didn't fully understand, and I was living there. There are many things going on in America that I guarantee you do not comprehend because you've not experienced it. The thing called American exceptionalism is a true thing. Okay, and it is an attitude that many Americans have. America, I'm sorry, I love my country.
Yeah, but
no, I'm not sorry.
Can you not?
Because it's the best. Because we stood up against one of the largest world powers. We fought them for our independence. It wasn't given to us. We didn't ask nicely like Canada. You know, it wasn't just given to us. We took it. We took it, and the king was like, oh, we can't stop them. Gave up. We earned it. So, yes, there is a little bit of a cockiness to Americans.
I'm not saying that, you know, abating colonialism is something to be, like, shrugged off, but to sit here and say a country with the, you know, numerous war crimes, abysmal, you know, state of the nation, a country that, you know, has segregation in living memory, should be one that, you know, it should be celebrated. We shouldn't be able to.
The UK has segregation in living memory.
The UK never had segregation of race. It just
okay.
Well, it didn't. It didn't have segregation in the way that, you know, America and South Africa.
No, it didn't have Jim Crow laws, and it did not have apartheid. But apartheid was English imposed in South Africa, considering that South Africa was an English colony. Yeah, pretty much apartheid was English.
Oh, I'm not saying that it wasn't, you know, a product of the British Empire.
Jim Crow is fully American. You know, that is their son to bear.
No, but what you're saying, you know, is that, you know, America's this great country. When
I'm not saying it's perfect, but it is great.
Yeah, exactly. It's not. Like, no nation is, and that's what we should be doing as political, like, thinkers. We should be.
Okay, it's like this.
It's not. If you'd let me, it's like, you know, people should be realizing, oh no, well, it's pretty silly having these structures and celebrating them, because, oh look, America is this nation built on genocide and slavery and colonialism and imperialism and all this, like, you know, disgusting actions across the globe, and, you know, the same for most nations really. And thinking, no, we don't need these tiers on political systems to provide power to the ruling class and the wealthy.
There's always going to be a ruling class, though.
But there's not, though. It's we can, like, destruct. Maybe through the history of humanity, we've seen a ruling class, but we can progress. Humanity is not confined to the past. We can move forward, and we can evolve as people. And as a species, and we can remove ourselves from this system that has handed power to.
We've evolved quite a lot,
and we can evolve further by moving away from capitalism.
We can, but I will tell you this: there are always going to be thought leaders. There are always going to be some type of leader. It doesn't matter what type of group. There is never going to be true equality. Why? Because there are people who are going to be more charismatic that's going to rise to the top. It's happened in every society in history, and it continues to happen even today.
Under capitalism, yes, but, you know,
no, not just capitalism.
Right, former.
Please unwrap yourself from the axle for just a moment. It doesn't have to be capitalist. understand every society, be it tribal, be
Remove
it
the
colonial,
conditions.
they have all had that. The only way to remove the condition is to remove humans.
No, it's to remove the class system,
The
and
class system always happens. People
it
will
won't.
always
You
try
can you
to
not see?
segregate one way or the other.
Can you not see that capitalism? Whilst history happened prior to that, but the idea that profiting off commodities is the center of society, and that wealth is the determinant of society. Whilst you have that as your focal point, is always going to lead to corruption.
As
And
long as there is a
whilst we're not,
specialized, as long as there is a specialized society, Owen, this is really what it comes down to. Okay, look, if you were self-sustaining individual, then there would be no classes. But as long as there is specialized people who have specialties in different things, and you use trade as a means to gather materials or commodities or whatever you want to call them, as long as there are specialized people, unless you want to go completely primitive and be self-sustaining yourself, you are never going to get rid of classes, because as long as there is specialized trades, industry, commodities, things like that, that only specific people are going to be able to do, because there's specific trade secrets or whatnot, you're going to have different classes, because some things are going to be valued more than others. The person who digs a hole for someone to poop in may not be considered as valuable as someone who diagnoses and treats illness.
the
It's
thing is,
because
though,
of specialties.
let's
This
focus
is
on that for a second, though. The person who digs that hole and makes the toilet and stuff or whatever, without them, all of a sudden you've got a health crisis, because we have a pretty bad waste management system if there's just feces everywhere, and indeed cholera, a scourge upon the world for centuries, wasn't really addressed until we sort of realised that it's not a good idea to drink where we defecate. Meanwhile, you can't say that their role isn't important in society and isn't worthy of their receiving the tools to a better life. You can't have one job without the other, and that's the same with all labor. And to go back to classes, if you remove the profit system, are you not, if you're not able to if you remove the idea that labor can be a commodity to be profited off, and the idea that commodities are something that should be in society as like a profiting weapon, you can improve society. You can remove the idea that even allows class of people to elevate themselves above one another. Like, for instance, the classes that specialize in engineering, they still rely on other classes. They still need their materials gathered. They still need food. They still need education. Every element of society connects to each other, and from that principle and from that reality, we should be having a society where everyone is valued and all human life is considered worthy of meals and homes. I think that fundamental, divide between our ideas is sort of revealing of why you so happily, align yourself like a proud American, and America's great, even with these war crimes. You don't even consider bad because it happened to the bad people. And I'm sorry to sort of impede any potential further elaboration you wanted to do, but it's getting quite late here, and I don't really want this to go on as long as last time. So if you'd
fair
sort
enough.
of not stop what you're saying, but just sort of stop winding it down a little bit, like keeping it close.
Well, I just look at it like this, okay? As long as you have specialized markets, you're going to have different classes. It's very simple. If you're going to have different valued commodities, because it requires more work in order to produce those commodities or those services, you're going to have different classes of people. It's simple. If all you have to do is learn how to fry an egg, what you can produce is a fried egg. But if you have to know every system of the human body in order to diagnose something, your service is going to be a little bit more costly. Well, a lot more costly, because of the amount of training involved. It doesn't matter if it's money, whatever you consider to use as trade. As long as there has been specialties, there have been different classes of people. Can we move past it? No, not unless you completely devalue everything that people do. And if you want to devalue the labor of everyone, because you're always talking about wanting to take the, you want to make the labor, you want the worker to own their labor. They do own their labor through capitalism. They do that by agreeing to work for companies for agreed wages. They determine. Now, some companies will say, I'm not going to pay you anything more than this. Well, then don't work there. You made that choice. The way the worker owns their own production, their own means of production today, is through negotiation of salaries, what they find acceptable.
So first, I don't think you quite understand what the means of production are. It's not like personal, using your hands and stuff. It's like the, society itself, like the tools of which you make stuff, like the factories and stuff, the land, the food, everything in society. And it being privately owned means that workers literally do not own them.
I don't buy into intersectionality, everything. Okay, here's the reality.
No, but
factories cannot exist without the workers. Would you agree?
Of course. No, workers are necessary for everything.
As long as the workers are willing to work for the wages they are offered, the factory can make a profit, correct?
Do you see, hold on a second, do you see that, in capitalism, because everything is privately owned, because, land, food, resources, that's all privately owned by the capitalists. And the capitalists then say to the worker, you can have access to this if you sell your labor to me for me to profit off. And if the worker doesn't agree, then yeah, they're free to do that, but they have no food and no land and they don't have a home and they die. So they are forced into making that choice because, no one's going to choose death over the other alternative of, misery, but at least you've got, basic source of survival, if that. It's ridiculous to have this position of saying, oh yeah, it's free and you got a choice, because it's just, it's not the case. It's not true of society. Just the idea that you can.
I think you are really.
Yes.
You're trying to make it seem like, oh well, everyone will own a piece of everything under the socialist ideal. I know that is the ideal. That is a utopia idea. The problem is it doesn't happen that way.
But what do you mean it doesn't happen that way?
Please tell me one socialist area, one country that has tried socialism, and even remotely.
This is a disingenuous question, because socialism is a
Tell me one society that has tried socialism without ending in some type of mass grave or someone taking over. Okay, yes, tell me, when has this ever happened?
In Paris, in the I think the 19th century, there were communes, and they were quite good. And then the capitalists came and killed them and imprisoned them and stuff, because it turns out that when you try and move away from capitalism, you start upsetting nearby capitalists. We were talking about America earlier.
What year was that?
I don't know the exact year, but 19th century. Catalonia is another one. Doing all right, and then the fascists show up.
Catalonia was its own individual kingdom until the Franco-fascists decided.
It wasn't a kingdom. No, it wasn't a kingdom.
I thought it was a kingdom. No, they had a king, didn't they?
No, they didn't have a king. It was a it wasn't. But even not even fully socialist nations, like nations like Chile, which was heading more not socialist, but certainly nationalizing and being less capitalist. When America comes in and crushes it, to expect a worker-owned, stateless society to exist within a world of capitalism is ignorant of the conditions of capitalism, because you need to be you can't have isolated areas of socialism when the system around you is still privately owned, because not only is trade not going to be as possible, you can't have equality on the doorstep of inequality, but also capitalists will try and quash you and stuff. And someone in the chat quite rightfully mentions, mass graves. That's the failure of quote unquote socialism. But what does that say of capitalism? I mean, literally, like the starving, the yearly deaths, the numerous humanitarian crises, the complete mismanagement of environment and ecology.
Socialism always ends in mass murder and breadlines that don't
That's
have
just
enough.
not true. That's not true.
Please, sometime in history where that did not happen.
Well, it hasn't.
Well, I mean,
like I said, there hasn't been a socialist state based on the conditions we've outlined. So, you can't, unless you're going to tell me that you just label anything that isn't capitalism as socialism, which is
no.
Exactly. So how can you call a nation where there isn't clear, like, there's clearly a class, there's clearly private ownership of means of production, there's a private sector, there's a police force. Like, you can't say these things.
Well, there was no private sector in the communist state known as Russia and the CCCP.
The state owned everything. The workers were forced to work for the state. That's not socialism.
The Socialist Republic of China has no private lands.
But it doesn't have private lands. It does, and it's again a state, society, and thus you can't call it like worker owned, can you? If the workers don't own the means of production, you can't call that socialist. Like, does that not sort of make?
How does a worker ever own the means of production?
The workers, like everyone in society.
How does everyone in society own the means of production?
It's the abolition of privately owned property. So the idea that
the abolition of trade,
the idea that a corporation can just own a hill, a farm, a massive island.
So there's no trade,
and thus the control of its distribution. You don't need to profit stuff. You don't need to profit off stuff to make a profit for yourself, because you've abolished the idea of commodification of life. You've abolished the idea of profit. Thus, there's no need to trade, because everything is shared, and resources are for the benefit of everyone rather than for the benefit of yourself and yourself alone. So again, I feel like a lot of your criticisms are coming from within a capitalist mindset, when in reality,
well, because I'm a capitalist.
No, as in like
I'm admittedly a capitalist. I'm a toxic capitalist.
But no, I mean, firstly, technically, a capitalist is merely someone who, owns capital and thus extracts profit.
I do own capital, and I do extract profit from other people.
Okay, fair enough. Then, yeah, you
gladly so. Gladly so.
Fine, whatever. Anyway, regardless, though, what I mean to say is that you're thinking, oh, socialism won't work because of this thing that happens in capitalism. You're thinking socialism is bad because of these scenarios I craft from a capitalist society. Like, you're not thinking of what would have happened and what would be in place under the new society.
What I'm thinking about is what is natural to humans. What always happens.
It's not natural to humans. It's the environment around them has been a certain way. Like, under feudalism, of course, things are going to happen a certain way. Under capitalism, of course, people are going to be a certain way.
Throughout history, regardless of the structure, the power structure, the government models that were existed, there has always been at least a very small minority of people who have ruled. There has always been classes. And you're saying that we're going to evolve past centuries and millennia of this. Here's the reality. As long as society has come together, there has always been someone to rule it. Even in the family, the smallest unit of a community, there is going to be someone who is going to be the leader of the family. It is how people are hardwired.
That's not
Can we move past it? Can we move past it?
That isn't true at all.
But I'm telling you, where is it not true? Please.
That isn't true. Like, again, like I've said, like, you are ignoring not only the sort of early stage of Homo sapiens, but also the fact that society isn't just like, it's got framework around it. Like, people are crafted through the environments they're made around. It's like when you say, oh, there's no incentive under socialism. Like, obviously, under capitalism, there's going to be that, with money. You need money to survive. You need to sell your labor hours to survive. So of course that's the incentive. But moving away from that, you're going to see that eradicating. People act how they want to act because of they want to do stuff. But just even if what you're saying is true, the idea that humanity is confined to the past and can only act based on how it has acted on the past is one of naivety and one that ignores the fact that people are capable of moving past
that
this.
millennia of trend should actually be kind of a hint.
But it's not correct. Your analysis is wrong. Like, people aren't inherently geared towards being tiered. You don't need a ruling class in a society to function.
I'm not saying you need it. I'm saying people will always seek it out as long as societies have lived. And we're talking 2000 BC, there has been ruling class over every society since recorded history has started. We're talking over 4,000, that's 4 millennia worth of history. People have never gathered in a society where everyone was equal.
But that's not,
it worked that way. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's a little counterintuitive to what the human experience is, because humans will always look for someone to be a thought leader, to be a blank leader of their group.
There's nothing wrong with specialized leaders in certain fields, but that doesn't mean that
but
they
under
have
socialism, there would be something wrong with that, because then
they
they would be held to a different standard than everyone else. They would not be equal.
That's not when we say equal, I mean like equal wealth, equal like resources and stuff. But that doesn't mean that they literally everyone's exactly the same, like a carbon copy. People, they still have fields. You still have someone who's better at medicine, someone who's better at sports. Like, all those fields still exist.
But you are going to realize that with more effort.
Okay. Like, different fields have different leaders. That doesn't mean those leaders, they don't have elevated positions of power. They have more experience and more ability to be listened to, but that doesn't give them the power. Under capitalism, it does, because they have more capital and thus more power in society because of their increased wealth. But under a system where you've removed the profit and removed the private ownership of wealth and resources and stuff, that is it's not only is it not going to happen, it's impossible for it to happen, because someone can't just bar people from using resources, because that's resources are owned by everyone and not just one person. Anyway, it's getting very late here, and I'm really sorry to sort of annul the conversation.
Oh, that's fine. You know what, Owen? It was a spirited conversation. I enjoyed it. Did you?
Yeah, it was all right.
I may have upset you a little bit, but hey, it is what it is. At least I'm being honest, and I'm not pulling any punches, and I'm not calling you names, because honestly, I don't think poorly of you. You may think poorly of me, but whatever.
I mean, I wouldn't say I think all of you. It's just I wouldn't even say upsetting, really. It's just the stuff you were saying about Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo Bay. It just doesn't really sit well with me, to be honest.
Well, I mean, some people, honestly, I don't believe deserve human rights. Because once they show themselves to be inhuman, I don't have to treat them as one. But that's my personal experience.
Some people don't deserve human rights. It's just it's not a good thing to say, in my opinion. Anyway,
it's hard to get a helmet, but that's okay. I mean, that's my opinion. I'm not here to quash yours, and you can squash mine all you want. It's okay. But I did appreciate it. Thank you for hosting me. Hey, people in the chat who hate me, I love you guys. People that love me in chat, I don't know if there's any, but hey, I love you too. Please follow me on Twitter at Aircraft Sparky. You can also catch me on YouTube. Tomorrow night, I will be talking about gun control with a liberal friend of mine. We will be discussing about the U.S. problem with guns. And Wednesday night, of course, will be my comedy show. Thursday night streams on Wednesday nights. Come check it out on YouTube. If you like this chat and you want Owen to have more of them, hey, hit that like button. And at the end of this, when it reposts, please throw some comments up there, because honestly, I'd like to see them, if not Owen would. And thank you for your time and giving me, this platform. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Sparky. Thanks to everyone for watching, and hopefully till next time. So I didn't get to elaborate on all the points that were raised by both of us. But hey, I mean, there's only so much we can do in a stream. Thanks everyone for listening.